In the early hours of June 23, 1952, the skies over the Korean Peninsula braced for a mission that many feared would start a new world war. Task Force 77, a formidable fleet of 4 American aircraft carriers, was poised to strike. The USS Philippine Sea, already in position, was soon joined by the USS Princeton, USS Boxer, and finally the USS Bon Homme Richard, sailing from Yokosuka, Japan, to bolster the force. Their objective was the Sui-ho Dam, a strategic target less than 40 miles from a MiG-15 fighter base complex in China. With 150 MiGs stationed there, the stakes were high. The mission's success hinged on a coordinated, simultaneous arrival over the targets, ensuring the enemy's defenses were caught off guard. As the clock ticked, aircraft from the U.S. Air Force, the U.S. Navy, and the U.S. Marine Corps took to the skies. Propeller-driven planes and jets, launched in tandem, aimed to converge on their targets simultaneously. The carrier aircraft of Task Force 77, masking their radar signatures, flew low over the mountains, preparing for a high-speed assault. Leading the charge in one of the staggering 410 strike sorties to be launched that day, 84 F-86 Sabres arrived in the Sui-ho area. Their primary task was to fend off the hundreds of MiGs that were taking to the sky. Accompanying U.S. fighter bombers had over 200 tons of bombs ready to rain on the dam. The fate of the world was in the balance. Destruction of the Sui-ho Dam would not only knock out 90% of power in the region and cripple North Korea, but this came at the risk of cutting off power to China. As hundreds of fighters met in the skies, so close to Chinese territory, British intelligence behind the scenes feared the mission was on the verge of triggering World War III. In the tense years of the early Cold War, a storm was brewing on the Korean Peninsula, threatening to engulf the world in another catastrophic war like the one it had just left. The conflict between the Eastern Bloc, led by the Soviet Union, and the Western Bloc, led by the United States, had reached a boiling point. The Korean War had become a volatile front in this global struggle. As the ideological battle between communism and capitalism raged in Korea, the world held its breath. The nuclear arms race between the superpowers had reached a fever pitch, and every skirmish, every tactical decision was shadowed by the specter of nuclear annihilation. Prominent figures like General Douglas MacArthur did not shy away from fanning these flames. They called for aggression, even hinting at using nuclear weapons against China and North Korea. The stakes were high, and the margin for error was razor thin. The situation reached a climax when China intervened in late 1950. UN forces, led by the US, had been pushing North Korean forces back, but China's entry into the war changed everything. The balance of power shifted, and the conflict's intensity surged. If heeded, General MacArthur's demand for an expanded war might have sparked a catastrophic confrontation with the Soviet Union and China. Yet, as the battle raged on, cracks began to appear in the alliance between China and the Soviet Union. The Soviets, cautious and aware of the escalating stakes, were reluctant partners. At the same time, China was bold and unflinching, committing troops and resources. MacArthur continued to push for an escalated war against China, and he made public statements that contradicted the administration's policies. President Truman dismissed MacArthur in 1951, reflecting the deep divisions within his administration, a mirror of the global struggle and the delicate dance of diplomacy and warfare. But as tensions reached an all-time high with stagnant peace negotiations, a daring attack plan would push the world closer to disaster. Target identified. The Sui-ho Dam, standing tall and magnificent on the Yalu River, was a marvel of engineering and a testament to human ambition. Constructed in 1941 by the Japanese, it was the 4th largest dam in the world at that time, stretching 853 meters in length and rising 160 meters in height. Its colossal 97-meter thick base held back more than 20 billion cubic meters of water in its reservoir, a silent, mighty force powering the region. The dam's 6 turbine generators, each with 100,000 kilowatt capacity, breathed life into much of western North Korea and the vital Port Arthur and Dairen regions in northeast China. But the Sui-ho Dam was not alone in this rugged landscape. 3 more hydroelectric systems were nestled in South Hamgyong province, each a network of 4 plants along a 50-kilometer stretch of river. These were the lifeblood of the region, the sinew and bone of its industrial strength. The northernmost was the Kyosen system on the Namdae-chon, ending at Tanchon. Due north of Hongnam on the Songchon-gang, the Fusen system was strategically placed within mountain gorges. The Chosin system, a river winding through mountain canyons, connected to the Songchon-gan south of Fusen Plant No. 4. These were not mere structures of concrete and steel. They served as symbols of power and fed the electrical grids of North Korea and parts of southern China. The Sui-ho Dam and its facilities had been on the UN strategic target list for months, but as the stalled truce negotiations at Panmunjom continued, the US commanders began to consider if destroying the dam could help them accelerate the process, while also drastically reducing North Korea's ability to produce weapons, equipment, and other materials necessary for the war effort. In addition to its industrial impact, the targeting of the dam was also part of a broader military strategy. The dam's destruction could cause flooding in strategic areas, disrupting transportation and impeding the movement of North Korean troops and supplies. The intention was to create logistical challenges for the North Korean military, potentially giving an advantage to the UN forces. Wavering resolve. From the early days of the war, the Joint Chiefs of Staff had debated the possibility of attacking the dam, but they continued to be hesitant, as the decision to occupy North Korea had not been made. General Douglas MacArthur, eager to shift the tide of the conflict, ordered the attacks to proceed, but a sudden twist occurred. The JCS urged caution and advised against destroying targets of long-term importance, resulting in a ban on attacking critical dams. Diplomacy took precedence over aggression, as fears of provoking China's entry into the war prevailed. As months wore on, the power plant's fate remained a topic of heated debate. General Otto P. Wayland proposed using them to gain a psychological advantage, only to be rebuffed by General Matthew Ridgway, a staunch advocate for force as a last resort. When President Truman replaced Ridgway with General Mark Clark, the winds of change began to blow. Clark and Vice Admirals Joseph J. Clark, Robert P. Briscoe, and Lieutenant General Glenn O. Barkas injected a new aggressiveness into the command. The hydroelectric plants were back on the table. Tensions escalated. Plans were made, debated, revised, and approved. Two starkly contrasting attack strategies were crafted, one daring enough to include the bombing of the Sui-ho Dam. It was a high-stakes game, where every move was scrutinized by the JCS and President Truman himself. Finally, the moment of decision arrived. Truman approved the more aggressive plan. The wheels were set in motion, with the ominous dates of June 23rd or 24th marked for execution. The operation's complexity was heightened with naval aircraft added to the attack on Sui-ho, a crucial adjustment proposed by Clark. Bold strike. The day was June 23, 1952, a day that would witness a daring and meticulously coordinated attack on the North Korean hydroelectric systems. Task Force 77, armed with 4 formidable aircraft carriers, stood ready, brimming with anticipation, poised to unleash a torrent of destruction upon strategically vital targets. It was a mission that would see the confluence of jet and propeller-driven aircraft, a symphony of air power, unparalleled in precision and aggression. But nature had other plans. As dawn broke, a blanket of clouds loomed over the Yalu River, causing General Wayland to postpone the attack. It seemed the skies themselves were conspiring to protect North Korea's dams. But as the hours passed, the weather suddenly turned favorable, and Wayland seized the opportunity. At 1 p.m., he gave the order to proceed, using the heavy clouds as a shroud for the attackers en route. The plan was as audacious as it was complex. 4 UN Services aircraft would launch a synchronized attack on North Korea's vital hydroelectric plants. They would use 5,000-foot mountain peaks as cover to mask their radar signature and converge upon the target, a high-speed run-in from an altitude of 10,000 feet. The mission was fraught with danger. Less than 40 miles from the target lay the Chinese MiG-15 fighter base complex. 150 MiGs had been counted, and coordination was crucial to nullifying any defensive response. But the threat was mitigated not by the UN forces, but by the inclement weather that initially postponed the attack and now prevented the covering MiGs from taking off. As the clock struck 4 p.m., the operation was in full swing. 35 Navy F-9F Panthers commenced runs to suppress anti-aircraft fire. Then came the dive-bombing runs, unleashing 81 tons of bombs in just over 2 minutes. The sky roared with the thunder of destruction as USAF jets added another 145 tons of bombs. Columns of fire and smoke climbed toward the sky as the electric plant facilities were systematically shredded, one by one, in a firestorm that could not be subdued. In a breathtaking display of military might, multiple targets were struck simultaneously. Mustangs, Sky Raiders, Corsairs, and Panthers unleashed havoc on the Fusen and Chosin plants, the Kyosin complex, and more. Task Force 77 and FEAF flew 410 strike sorties, a ballet of destruction that lasted for hours. Yet war is never without loss. 2 F-80s were battle damaged and written off. An F-4U was heavily damaged and made a water landing. Its pilot was rescued in the nick of time. Others faced flak, hydraulic system failure, and damage from bomb debris. The attack was a masterstroke of military strategy, a blend of audacity, precision, and execution. From the initial planning to the final damage assessment, it was a mission that demonstrated the prowess of the US and UN forces. Reverberations. After the dust settled, reconnaissance photos and pilot assessments revealed the heavy damage inflicted on the North Korean power landscape, but the mission was far from over. The strategic power plants were still standing, and the next day's battle was already being planned. With the dawn, Air Force F-84s and Navy Sky Raiders took to the skies, their sleek silhouettes glinting in the morning light. The pilots launched attacks on Sui-ho, raining destruction on the mighty dam. Judging it obliterated, they pressed on, their sights set on other targets. The Princeton aircraft unleashed fury on Fusen, while Mustangs of the 18th FBG zeroed in on Chosin. Other planes swooped down on the remaining Kyosin plants, each hit a calculated strike, each explosion a step closer to victory. Despite minor damage to one Sky Raider, the morning's mission was successful. But the afternoon brought new challenges, fraught with danger and triumph. The destruction of Kyosin No. 3 came at the cost of a Corsair, but in a miraculous twist, the pilot was rescued at sea, a small victory in the midst of battle. Elsewhere, an F-86E was lost after a deadly tangle with a MiG. Additional strikes were launched at transformer stations, the power grid crumbling under the relentless assault. Days turned into weeks, and the battle wore on. Smaller numbers of Air Force fighters continued to press the assault on Chosin and Fusen, each sortie a measured dance of skill and courage. The numbers told a story of a grueling battle. 730 sorties by land-based fighter bombers, 546 by carrier aircraft, and 238 counter-air sorties. 5 aircraft were lost, but every pilot was saved, a testament to the bravery and resilience of those who fought. Global panic. The aftermath of the massive attack on North Korea's power plants reverberated across both the battlefield and the political arena. The devastation was almost beyond comprehension. North Korea's power production capability lay in ruins, with approximately 90% destroyed. A total blackout shrouded the nation for 2 haunting weeks, a silent reminder of the might and precision of the assault. Shockwaves rippled through the communist regime. But North Korea was not the only one to suffer the consequences of the attack. China, relying on some of the power from North Korean plants, saw a significant reduction in available energy to northeast China by 23%. Blackouts ensued, the first consequence of the war that reached deep into mainland China. The triumph of the battlefield was met with turbulence on the international stage. In Britain, the Labour Party leaders quickly condemned the operation, defining it as a reckless provocation of China that could lead directly into World War III. The attack became a political weapon as the Labour leaders challenged the ruling Conservatives. A tense vote in the House of Commons followed. Though the Churchill government barely survived, the political storm continued to rage. But the consequences of the attack were complex and multifaceted. Despite the devastation to North Korean infrastructure and the headaches caused to China, the attack did not become a significant escalation in the war. The conflict continued to be limited to a proxy war, a contained struggle within a broader ideological battle. Disappointingly, the attack also failed to meet the UN's expectations. The hoped-for breakthrough in the peace talks remained elusive. While the dam's destruction was significant, the military impact was relatively minor. North Korean and Chinese forces continued fighting without significant hindrance, the momentum of their cause undiminished. On the contrary, the attacks may have led to hardened positions rather than forcing the parties to negotiate. Some viewed the bombings as an escalation of the war, causing North Korea and its allies to become more resolute in their stance. The gamble had not paid off. In the end, the attack was of little military consequence. However, for some alarming days, it stirred political actors into claiming that the world was on the verge of falling into World War III.